Good afternoon, everyone. We'll be starting in just a second here. My name is Art Hunter. I'm the co-chair of SCORE Westchester, and we are going to be learning today from Danielle Centopahanti Davidson, a founder of Main Street Marketing. But first, a few words about SCORE and SCORE Westchester. SCORE Westchester supports local entrepreneurs through free confidential mentoring and educational programs like this one. Our clients are startups and established businesses. Our volunteer business mentors have amazing backgrounds in a wide range of businesses. The most important thing to know about working with the mentor is they have only one goal, and that's to help your business succeed. To reach us, you can reach us at score.westchester.org. Now for some housekeeping. Everyone will be muted during this presentation. As we go, please submit your questions and comments using the Q&A, not chat button. Also, a link to the recording will be sent to everyone afterwards. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Danielle, founder of Main Street Marketing, a full-service marketing practice specializing in approachable strategies for small and medium-sized business in Westchester, the Hudson Valley, and the tri-state area. Go ahead, Danielle.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Art.
Absolutely.
Thank you all for joining. So I'm sure when you got the email about Demystifying Content webinar, a little bit of dread and panic set in. Content is probably the most overused word in marketing at this point in general for the past 10 or so years. But I thank you all for participating, and we'll take some questions at the end. So I'm going to just run through this, and then we'll jump into your thoughts in the last 15 minutes or so. But first, want to kind of cover the initial topics that we're going to run through. So I'll do a quick little introduction about myself, and then we'll get right into it. We're going to cover content's real purpose, getting to know your audience and engaging in two-way conversations, crafting the right kind of content, optimizing effectiveness and SEO best practices, scheduling and repurposing, and then I'll do a quick, the 411 TLDR type of takeaways, and how to reach me if you guys have additional questions that we're not able to get to through the presentation. So without further ado, we'll go right into introductions. So this is me. I own Main Street Business Strategies, a marketing practice, as Art mentioned, specializing in small and medium-sized businesses across Westchester and the Hudson Valley. I started off my career in corporate advertising and PR, working on clients like Target and CBS and Hasbro and Nissan and a bunch of different things. So kind of run the gamut of different industries, which was great experience to now get into some work with all of you. So without further ado, we'll go right into content's real purpose, which I mentioned at the jump. Content, probably the most overused word that we've had in the past decade or so. It really covers news to journalism to things happening on TikTok and content from influencers. So wanted to kind of double down on what the definition is when it comes to creating content for businesses like ours, small and medium-sized businesses. So we'll get right into it with, here we go. Content's number one objective should be considered as a way to showcase a business's differentiator in a creative way. So if we use this as a filter now throughout this presentation, but then also as you guys start to create, it'll help delineate between value and waste. So for example, and this is a question I get from clients all the time, is whether or not it's a good idea to tap into a trend. So I'm using that as an example here because it's a widely known topic, but what I typically tend to tell clients is that 99% of the time, trends on social media is almost always fluff because we're getting lost in the sauce with other businesses, creators, brands, the everyday social media user. And so what we're doing really is just copying and pasting a template, a narrative, music, whatever the case is, and adding our own business, images or videos to that template and just getting lost in with what everyone else is doing with that same template. And our differentiator ends up falling by the wayside. So again, we just kind of want to focus on showcasing a business's differentiator as the core filter for content as we move through this presentation, but then also when you guys are out there creating. So for those who maybe don't quite know what the differentiator is for your business, totally fine. Right now, I have a couple of thought starters for brick and mortar and also for e-com and service-based businesses, so digital first. And these are just ideas to kind of help you out, but then you can go in and, finesse and think of new ideas as well. But I'll start with brick and mortar first. So really what we want to do is tap into the five senses when it comes to underlining your differentiator. So, from a visual perspective, your window displays or sounds, what music you're playing, feels, if there's any, touch elements to your business, taste, if that's relevant. And then for e-com and service-based businesses, we really don't have the advantage of optimizing towards our five senses. So we really need to highlight the personality of our business through website, social, newsletter, and customer service communication. So things like the language you use, the visuals, colors, design, are all inherently your differentiator. You will not speak the same way as the guy next to you, the woman next to you. And that's really the same for brick and mortar as well. Even if you and a neighboring business are under the same industry, you inherently have things that are different, whether it comes out in your personality of your team or through the look and feel like we talked about. And these things will be content generators for you. So especially for brick and mortar, when someone can walk into your store or your shop or whatever the situation is and capture that feel for you and post it on their socials. And it could be user generated content, or UGC is how it's shorthanded. And is also a great way to initiate two-way conversation. So here are a couple of thought starters, again, for brick and mortar and e-com services, e-com and service-based businesses, to help underline your differentiator. There are a ton more options, but some ground foundational options to kick off. Okay, so now that we kind of have an understanding of what content's real purpose is, through the lens of a differentiator. So we need to start understanding who our audience is and engaging in that two-way conversation with them. So to understand who your content is for, you kind of want to think about the three audience categories. There are others outside of these three, but these are core to who you're speaking to on a regular basis with all of your content. So the first is current and previous customers. This one's straightforward, obviously. Those who have made a purchase or a transaction with you already and are either sticking around because they really love your brand, they love what you stand for, and maybe you're a product-based business where really you wouldn't be buying multiple of them in a short time span, but people really like what your brand stands for. Or they're sticking around because they tend to buy a second or third time. And then the second is prospective customers. So those are the ones that are in the consideration and research phase and determining whether they'll go with you or another business. Basically, they have a problem that came up in their life. They have a question that came up in their life, and they're like, okay, I know the answer. I know who I need to go to, what industry I need to go to get the answer here. I just need to pick which of these people or which of these businesses. And then the third is first time in market customers, excuse me. So those people are the ones who haven't really come across a problem or a question before. And so they are first time researchers about your industry. So the example I tend to use most often is I'm a first time home buyer and pipe bursts, and I don't know where to begin with, like a plumber or a contractor. Like, who do I need to go to first? I've never been a homeowner before. I've never had to deal with this before. So who do I go to? And so those people are ones that are looking at an education-based content piece. So you're trying to target one of these three at least when you're creating content and thinking about creating content. So then as we move into communication with content as a communication tool, it's important to provide your audiences with ways to reply back to your content or ask for more from you. It's important to understand that when you are picking a specific audience bucket that you are going to create your content for, that there are ways that these people can either reach back out to you, go to your website to learn more, find more videos about you, make a transaction immediately, whatever the situation is, make it easy for them. So some it's simple examples that I have included here are polls and quizzes on social media. So if you just want to test the waters with who's following you or what do people really want to know from your business, test common misconceptions about your business or your vertical and see how people respond. Are people responding to that type of content? And that's an easy way to initiate that conversation. And then the second is website insights. This is not so one-to-one, right? Like we are not getting an actual response verbally from an audience with website insights. But what we're doing is understanding if people are navigating to a particular web page frequently and then dropping off, scrolling all the way down your homepage, moving to a different part of your website, and then how can that data feed into a new piece of content over time. So this might seem a little bit esoteric in terms of like understanding this as a reply back method, but it is important to know because people are providing you with information. They're saying, yes, we want more from you, or no, I went to your website and I do not want more from this. And then the third and fourth are newsletters, surveys, and testimonials, which are pretty straightforward. But testimonials especially are great for current and previous customers who want to give you, your props. And so give them the opportunity to do that. And so I just wanted to give a quick example here. This is a client of mine, Light Mirror. They're based in Irvington, New York. And their brand on their website, their D2C e-commerce brand, they highlight their differentiator. They make mirrors made from glass from film instead of glass, as you can see. And they highlight their differentiator on their website and on social media platforms. One of their key audiences was new apartment and home renters or owners within the Gen Z area. And this is an entirely user-generated content a video. We did not pay this person. They purchased a mirror and then they created this content on their own will and tagged us, and we were able to engage then in that two-way conversation. The video itself got 20,000 views on Instagram, and we were able to then engage in any comments with even this person's followers to tell them more about our business. So just start thinking about these things as you're differentiating yourself on social or on your website. Okay. So as a quick, just what we know already, because I know this is a lot of information and it's already overwhelming because content in and of itself is overwhelming. But just to recap, the first thing that we talked about is content's real value and purpose is to showcase your differentiator. And then the second thing is keeping audience and two-way comms in mind as they're vital in the content creation process. So again, we'll stop it during the presentation just to kind of, regroup and see what we've learned already. And so this is our first check-in. And now we'll go into crafting the right kind of content, which seems so stressful. And it's probably one of the most stressful things that business owners have to deal with when it comes to marketing. So we'll get right into it. So with your differentiators in mind, there are a few pillars to prioritize when it comes to crafting content. There are other pillars that, make sense, but these are the three that you should keep as core to your business and core to your content creation. The first is brand storytelling. The second is announcements. And the third is educational how-tos, step-by-steps, and knowledge sharing. So we'll talk a little bit more about how you can start to craft the content and measure how well it does in the next couple of slides. But I think for the most part, we are all pretty familiar with what brand storytelling is. As a quick 101, it's basically just teaching people a little bit more about your brand, yourself, your team, your products, anything that just is a little bit more, it tends to be more fluffy. Like there's not so much of a hard call to action when you're creating brand storytelling content. The second, announcements, works really well when you're launching a new product or you are extending your store hours or your restaurant is closing for the night because the power is out. Some of these things are, quick little announcements, but they are important to tell your audiences about them. And then the third, educational how-tos, step-by-steps, and knowledge sharing. that's really just positioning yourself as a leader in your space, in your industry. So it may not be like a one-to-one of telling someone exactly about your product or your service and trying to get a sale right off of that, but it's saying, hey, I really know my stuff, and this is what it's about, this is what my industry is about, and this is what you should look for when you're looking for my product or service. And so people start to build trust with that type of content and the people that create it. So as I mentioned, there are a few metrics to map back to these three pillars. Again, there are more than just these three, but I think these are really important when it comes to the three different audiences that we talked about. So measuring the success is equally as important as creating the content. I know that's mundane, but it is only going to help you understand what your schedule should be to release the content, or what people are expecting from you next. So for brand storytelling, we have metrics that show the audience wants to learn more about your brand. So a video view completion, more video view watches, or more follows. And then from announcements, action-based metrics like signups or cancellations. Like I mentioned before, if you're a restaurant and your power goes out and you can't run service that night, you need to tell people, hey, you need to make other plans, or your reservation is proactively canceled, whatever the situation is. And you'll start to understand, like, how those announcements retrieve levels of success over time. Sometimes it's immediate, and sometimes it takes a little bit longer, like if you are announcing a new product launch on a steady basis or something along those lines. And then the third, for educational how-tos and step-by-steps, we're looking at completion-based metrics like content read-throughs, or completion rate of a video, or saves for future reference. I know that's a big thing on Instagram, especially on TikTok as well. People will save content so that they can refer back to it at a later point. And that's critical information. If you are someone that people automatically trust already, enough to save it and go back to it, you're getting 2, 3, 4, 5 views from the same person, and that's excellent. And then also clicks. So are people moving from one piece of content of yours to another because they want to know more about what you have to say and the things that you're teaching people? And then what I did here is just kind of give a few types of content examples and formats. So these are 17 to 18. There may be more as well, but these kind of cover the core of them. I mean, webinars like we're on right now, listicles, which were made popular by a BuzzFeed, case studies that you can upload onto your website, guides and how-tos for the educational pieces, Q&As, infographics, short form video, whatever the case is. These are just the different formats that you can use to then again do brand storytelling, do announcements, do education-based posts for your three audience buckets, or one of the three under your while still showcasing your differentiator. Okay, and so now we can start getting into optimizing effectiveness and SEO best practices. Again, this is, it seems daunting, and it seems like super time consuming, and there may be some cases where it will be a little bit of both, but what we're trying to do here is just break down the wall so we're not feeling so stressed out. So really what we want to do is find the right words to say and putting our best foot forward when crafting content. So the biggest issue that most people have is that they feel like they need to produce content every single day, multiple times a day throughout the entire week, and it's a nonstop grind. And that's for good reason. People feel that way. All of our social media channels and our apps and everyone is telling us we have to pump out as much content as possible. Instagram wants us to post 6 in-feed posts a day and 18 Instagram stories. It's a lot. And when you get to that point where you are doing that much, you're going to have burnout. And also at the same time, you're not producing quality content that highlights your differentiator. You're really just posting to post, or you're uploading to upload, or creating a blog post because it's on a topic that's trending when it's not super relevant to your industry or business. So what we want to do is the research in advance when it comes to creating the content. So for doing research in advance, there's some inspiration tools that we can use to help us understand what people are looking for. So Google keyword trends, Pinterest trends, answerthepublic.com, which is a really cool website that tells you essentially, if you pop in any word, it'll tell you what things people across the internet are talking about. It gathers from all these different triggers, and it'll tell you exactly what people are looking for on a more regular basis regarding whatever, phrase or keyword you pop in there. And then also Instagram Discovery tab, which is the little magnifying glass tab in your Instagram app. And on that page, it'll show you what's trending for content that you like to watch. And then also at the top, it'll give you some keywords or some sections that are popular across Instagram as well. On my personal Instagram feed, I tend to have things like outdoor hiking and dogs. So there are a bunch of different things to understand like what's popping in your world. And it's really helpful when you combine it with Google keyword trends or answerthepublic.com and things of that nature. And then the second part is knowing what your audience is looking for, which again, still goes back to understanding the research and understanding what people are searching for. So if we use long tail keywords, which are basically detailed phrases that highlight the topic of your content rather than generic keywords, alongside the mention of your business and your business location, it will help audiences find you when they're doing their own searches. So I give an example for my own business because marketers, you'll run into 5 of us on the street in New York City at every different corner. So I tend to say that for my business, I provide approachable marketing services in Westchester, New York. And that's not to say that there aren't other approachable marketing service-based businesses in Westchester, New York, but when I map that to my website, to my Instagram, to all of my posts, to my blogs, to my newsletter, Main Street business strategies attached to approachable marketing service in Westchester, New York tends to populate more often because I'm just consistent with it. And so thinking about things, if you're a restaurant, you're not just an Italian food restaurant or a Korean restaurant, you have more going on. And it's important to elaborate a little bit and help with your search results. Okay, cool. So I wanted to show another example here where we're talking about SEO optimization. This is a client who she's an interior designer, and she wanted to use the education-based pillar to reach people looking for, one, her services, but also someone they can trust that knows the area. So she is based in Westchester, and she created a guide format of home decor stores that interior designers shop at. And we use long tail keywords to describe, what her services are. We use long tail keywords to describe what some of these home decor stores are about. And we did some backlinking as well, which is really important when it comes to content creation. You want to backlink or basically link yourself, your content to either other parts of your website. So if you have one blog post you wrote, let's say 8 months ago, and then now you're writing a new piece of content, and somewhere within this current piece, you can harken back or recall back to a piece that you wrote 8 months ago, link that in your new blog post so that people can move and stay with your brand for a longer amount of time, should they choose to click on it. It also helps with SEO to show that you are pointing to other areas on your website. You're being thorough about creating a piece of content. And again, it helps with Google, and all the search engines are looking for those types of things. So now that we've kind of covered these 4 primary areas, content's real value and purpose to showcase is to showcase differentiators. The second being keeping an audience and two-way communication in mind are vital in the content creation process. And content should fall into one of the 3 measurable categories: storytelling, brand storytelling, announcements, and education-based or how-tos. And the 4th being research and crafting content with the audience will get us far. So making sure that we're keeping all 4 of these things in mind, which again seems overwhelming, but when you distill it down to understanding that you really just want to showcase your differentiator to the right people in the right way, based on what they're looking for, is a lot easier to then produce something that's valuable and will create something that's valuable for your brand than to just hop on a trend or do something quickly just to say that you posted for the day, which we've all done it and I do it. But it's important to keep these things in mind for quality content. So now I want to get a little bit into scheduling and repurposing your content, because it's important to understand that schedules are tough, especially as business owners. And we don't really have the time in the day to post 6 times on Instagram and then 13 times on TikTok and also upload a blog post. And what about our newsletter? Did that go out this week? Like, we get it. So we need to figure out a schedule that works for us, not a schedule that works for each of these platforms individually. And then also repurposing our content so we get longevity out of it. So there's a benefit to not over creating, as we talked about. So you'll lessen the amount of stress and the amount of throwaway content. It's disheartening to create content and be like, okay, I got that done for the day. There's no reaction. There's no follow-up communication. There's no reply back. There's no purchase. There's no transaction. It's disheartening. So what we want to do, again, is just focus on making sure we're getting the content out that people are looking for. So we're focusing on quality content rather than churning out quantity, which I know is an age-old saying at this point, but it really is important. And then creating a piece of valuable content at a regular cadence that works for you will generate stronger success metrics in the end. It may take a little bit to get to that point, but it's worth it. So the example I typically use here is, I expect my favorite podcast to show up every Monday morning. When it doesn't, I'm bummed out. And you don't want your audiences or your followers or your potential clients or your potential audience to be bummed out that you're not uploading and updating your stuff at a regular amount of time, within a regular amount of time. So this doesn't mean that you can't still communicate with your audience on the daily, through social interactions, polls, quizzes, imagery, video, whatever it is. Like I said, if you're a brick and mortar and someone comes into your shop and takes a photo of your checkout counter because you've set it up, so beautifully, or they're taking photos of your food, which is an obvious one for restaurants and to-go places. Upload that, and that could be your piece of content for the day while you're still working on that larger piece of content for the future. So what we want to do is plan that smart scheduling cycle. So what we can do is drop content using insights and a drip method, which sounds more complicated than it is. But really, the first thing is reviewing your website and social media insights, which we briefly touched on in the beginning. Understanding, where people are navigating to on your website, how often they're staying with your website, what your bounce rate is, whatever the case is. When are they visiting it? Which day? By hour? When are your Instagram followers mostly on the app? Test that release of content within a 1 to 2 hour window of that peak time frame. And if you're like, I have no idea how anyone would know what those peak hours are, you can quickly do a Google search of how do I get to my website analytics, and for a Shopify, a Wix, a Squarespace, whatever it is, and it'll show you exactly where to find some of these things. Same with Instagram. If you're a professional business and your business has an Instagram account, there's an option to see how often people are on the platform that follow you and when they're most interacting with content on specific days, which is super helpful to know. And then the second thing is teasing out the release of new content. So if you have, and this mostly goes for larger pieces of content. So if you're doing a podcast interview, or if you're doing a huge blog on something, or if you're doing a culmination of data to do the top 5 XYZ in your industry or something along those lines, you can tease that out. Again, get the longevity out of one thing. So let your people know like a new installation is coming. Like I mentioned, my podcast comes on every morning at Monday when I go on my morning walk. And if it's not there on Monday morning, it sucks. So let people know it's coming. And then the third is integrating a drip method. So when it comes to new valuable content, you don't need to release it all at once. You worked really, really hard on it. You did the research. You know who you're talking to. You are highlighting a differentiator. Drip it over installments over an appropriate amount of time. So if you have, like I said, the top 5, things for my industry, or top 5 things happening in marketing, let's say, I could do one thing per day, in ascending order, the 5th, 4th, 3rd, 2nd, 1st, throughout the full week. So it's one piece of content, but one post per day or one blog post per day. And you're getting as much as you can out of that one piece. And so I quickly want to do the 411 takeaways. Again, I know this is a lot of content, and there's a lot to talk about. So I just wanted to do some quick things to consider. So the first being finding your differentiator and making that the core focus of your content on a regular basis. So again, for the brick and mortar, can you tap into those 5 senses? And really highlight everything that your brand has to offer. An example that I have seen a lot in media lately is MasterCard, and the fact that they've now attached a jingle to their card when you're doing a tap to purchase in store. And there's a little jingle that plays right after your MasterCard is swiped. You won't find that with a Visa. You won't find that with Amex, whatever it is. Like, you are able to use it immediately, and you could hear it immediately. And it's reminding people, like, hey, I have a MasterCard. There's like a whole branding aspect to it. And the second is, don't feel peer pressured into hopping onto a trend for the sake of pumping out content. It will tire you out. A trend is only a trend because it's relevant for a minute in time, and then by the next day, by the next week, it's no longer relevant. And it's important to understand, that you're burning yourself out when you're just staying on top of trending content, plus you're throwing yourself into the mix with all of these other people. And then the third is doing some research, reviewing your insights, talking to your audience, and repurposing the content. So like we talked about, looking at Instagram and Google, and understanding what keywords and long tail phrases make sense for the piece of content you're producing or you're writing about, that also people are looking for at certain times of the day, or based on your website analytics or Instagram analytics. It's only going to benefit over a longer period of time people that trust your brand. And again, like, even if that schedule is once every 2 weeks, but it is valuable content that has some thought to it, it will get you far, and in the long run, create a more emotional driven and trustworthy communication with that audience. The other part of it is understanding how Google looks at and Bing looks at some of this content, and that they're ranking essentially the type of content you're putting out, and ranking your website. So you want to make sure you're speaking to humans, you're creating content for humans. And so those are the quick 3 takeaways that I hope help develop some content that you guys are proud of, and also that makes sense for your brand. I know I kind of ran through that super quick. I don't know if there are too many questions. It seems like, in terms of content in general, I know that it's a pretty intimidating thing, and it's a buzzword that's been around for way too long. So would love to hear if you guys have any questions. Feel free to email me or shoot me a note. And then also, if there are any questions that popped up in the Q&A. I know we're ending a couple of minutes earlier than 1:40, but happy to start taking them now if there are any.
No, Daniel, we do have a question, but I do want to thank you for this presentation. I thought it was really, really good. And I really appreciated the topic of using the metrics that your platforms provide for you to craft your content. I think that's really key. Yeah. And the thing that I would remind everybody that's watching this is that we will be sending out a link to this presentation, because the thing that I got from this is that it is an excellent tool to outline your social media or your marketing plan by going back and referring to this presentation and using these slides as a tool. They're really powerful, and there's a lot of data in here. And we are getting a lot of questions. So we have a question, first question, we had a question from Richard. He wants to know, are there SEO don'ts in terms of content creation? Is there elements of content that will cause a website publisher to be dinged by a search engine? Or are there things not to do, I guess?
Yeah, that's really smart. It's a smart question. So, one of the things that Google recently released is their helpful content guidelines or helpful content system. They released it in December of 2022, and it was pushed out through, I think, mid-January. They finally wrapped that up. And basically what it said is, don't create content for the internet. Don't create content that is based on trends happening in pop culture if you are not a specialist in that topic. And like understanding that these types of things, and I'm happy to also share the article and the guidelines as well. There are a number of different things that they say, like, let's focus on this instead of this, and those don'ts are equally as important, like you're asking, then as the do's. So yeah, making sure that you're creating content for humans and not for internet purposes and not for trends. You're talking about the stuff that you are knowledgeable in. And there are a few others that I'm happy to send the link on. But yeah, there are a couple of things that they just rolled out. This is really recent. And they're starting to ding websites actually that aren't following these things. So your website is probably currently going through a whole new ranking with Google at the moment, if they haven't already, so that they can understand what's going on your website.
I guess, and Richard has a follow-up question to that. Are there any legal issues around content creation aside from top line, don't plagiarize? Any other advice like that?
Yeah, so one of the number one things that I think people don't really think about when they're producing content is reusing things from other people. I mean, obviously plagiarism is a thing that we definitely should not be doing. We've been taught that for forever, but that's even the case for taking someone's image and reposting it without their knowledge or without approval from them, or having stuff in a blog post or on your website that isn't tagged appropriately. So if you're not saying exactly what's going on behind that image using alternate text, and Google's not able to read an image, they're able to, or look at an image, they're able to read what's behind the image. So giving proper descriptions of what that image is of, and making sure that you're tagging the appropriate photographer, videographer, whoever owns it, giving credit where it's due is super important. So those are the things that come top of mind.
That's great. And then here's a great question. How should someone go about outsourcing content creation and marketing in general when they're starting a small e-commerce business?
Yeah. So I know it's super intimidating to start thinking about all of the things you have to do at one time when you're starting a business. I felt that way about 3 years ago when I started doing my own thing. And, I think the research process and understanding, okay, what exactly you want out of someone to help with this stuff. But knowing exactly, and this kind of goes back to the beginning of the presentation, like what your differentiator is, making sure that you know it before bringing someone else on who's trying to convince you of maybe something else that does not resonate. So knowing what you want, knowing what you are in the beginning, and then going out and saying, like, this is what I want, or this is the consulting that I need to understand, because sometimes we don't know what we don't know. And so getting advice from someone through a consultation session or whatever the case is super helpful to just brainstorm and whiteboard with someone. And then going from there in terms of like, okay, can this person be the content creator for me, or can they just advise me on being my own content creator? But someone that works really well with you, you jive with, you have good conversation with, is super important. I think that knowing what you want or knowing how you want to tackle things first is great.
Right. I like that answer a lot. I think that if you refer back to this presentation and use these slides to pull together a very simple marketing strategy for yourself, and honestly, it's a great plug for SCORE. It's a chance to run. You can run it by a mentor, and before you contact an agency, and just get it clarified. Because I think knowing who you are is the most important thing you can do.
Yeah, I did that. That was my first step.
Oh, I got a nice comment just about not posting every day. They appreciate that idea.
Oh, great.
That avoids burnout. That was great.
Yeah, I mean, that is really the thing. Almost every single one of my clients, if not all of them, are always saying, like, I know I have to do it. I just don't have time. All right, I'll just repost something, or I'll do, whatever it is. And what you don't want to do is generalize your business, right? Like you don't want to take a meme from somebody else or a GIF from somebody else and just upload it onto your own to say that you've uploaded for the day and hopefully it reaches people and people will resonate. Um, because it does create burnout, because then it just becomes I mean, it is already a chore in and of itself, but hopefully it's a little bit more exciting when you're writing about something that you're passionate about because you're passionate about your business. So let's focus on that, I think is important. And the schedule could be whatever works best for you guys.
No, that's great. Absolutely. Any other questions out there from anybody at all?
I know we're running a couple minutes early, so I appreciate everyone kind of reaching out during the presentation to ask the questions, and hopefully the extra few minutes will give you enough time to brainstorm some content ideas. Shameless plug.
No, it was good. Like I said, I think, understanding your platform and understanding your tools, I thought was really, I can't emphasize that enough for people. I thought that was really invaluable. Any other advice you have around that? And just how do you know your platform? How do you get to know your platform?
Yeah. Sorry, I was just oopsies double checking that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Let me go back 1 second. Okay, we'll just do this quickly.
Yeah, sure.
So I do think that knowing exactly who is visiting your page is important, and going into your analytics and knowing exactly what when people are on the platform or whatever it is. And like I said, if you don't know exactly where when or where that's happening, a quick Google search. I'm also happy to show people if you wanted to reach out to understand a bit more. But basically, going into your website analytics and understanding, like if you're seeing that the people are flocking to your homepage off of either a piece of content that you've produced or just based on a Google search and then not really going elsewhere, you could see that drop off from page to page and understand, like, okay, what is it about my homepage? I'm really getting people to go there. My SEO is great. I'm answering the question that people are looking for when they're initially Google searching. But what is it that is going to bring people to that next page, to my shop, to my services page, to my blog page, to my journal, whatever it is? Understanding that drop off rate or that bounce rate or the click throughs, whatever the case is really important. And I think working with someone, that is knowledgeable in the space is also, that's also helpful. You can look at analytics all day, but in the end, they're just numbers and you have to put, some thought behind what those numbers mean. So if you are overwhelmed by it, I definitely think reaching out to someone to help analyze will be useful. That's a useful amount of time. If ever you don't, if say you don't even speak to them ever again, that consultant or whoever it is, but at least now you know how to read your analytics, you'll get so much farther than without it. So I think that's really important.
We have two new questions I think are really, really important. One is saying, are you saying let's see, I want to read this right. Best post is to find out what time most people are on your site and post then. You can find out what time people are on your Instagram too. So they're asking, can you find that? How do you find that data?
Yeah, exactly. So I would say, you're not, don't hold yourself to the exact time, like hour that most followers are on Instagram, or the hour that most people are on your website. You don't have to stick to that one, like 5 p.m., but test and learn a little bit, right? So like you're not, like if your schedule is Thursday at around 3 and you know that most of your followers and most of your traffic for Thursdays is coming in around 4 or 5, great. Post at 3 and have that content ready for these people when they're coming to you. So yeah, I think that it's important to know that time frame, to know that window. It'll also tell you like which days of the week, which months out of the year. Everyone has seasonality. Every industry has seasonality to some extent. And I think that it's important to, especially if it's like location based, I think it's important to know those hours and those days and then craft some things around it. But don't get too hung up on that one specific hour. If you're like, yeah, Thursday's my day, and like who knows what time it's going to go out, that's also fine. You just know that people, around like 5 p.m., like you might see a spike around then, and people coming to your page or to your content around that time.
Yeah, I think test and learn was a great word. I think Teresa has a really good question too. You may have covered this already, but is it effective to share the same content across all platforms or do variations of each platform? How do you manage the time to do this? And what are this? Let's see. How do you manage the time to do that when you're a one-shot person?
Sure. Yeah, that is a great question. And yes, I think that there needs to be a little bit of differentiation between one piece of content can go on all of the platforms that you own. It can go on your website, it can go on your blog, your newsletter, your Instagram, your TikTok, whatever. It should be slightly altered just to fit the format of the placement. So if you're uploading a blog post, obviously that's a longer form piece of content. I would start with the longer form piece and then start to distill it down for the other placements. If you're writing a newsletter and you want to include that blog post within your newsletter, you can say, here's a preview of what's going on in my blog post this week. And then also just link out to that blog post. Same thing with Instagram. You wrote a huge blog and then say there are like 3 takeaways from the blog post. Yes, you elaborate more on it in the blog post, but you have like 3 headlines, 3 takeaways. Chunk that up into 3 takeaways on your Instagram, and then link out to your blog through your link in bio or your whatever the case is, so that people go to your website to read the full thing. I think it's important to catch people where they are. Most people aren't going to want to read too in-depth stuff in certain places, but definitely link back to the key source every time.
Okay, I have a question. I just have to go back in the questions a second here.
Yeah, no problem.
Where'd it go? I guess I don't see what that, someone's saying that I'm not seeing their question. But I don't see a name attached to it, but there is a question from Christine about, did you talk about evergreen content?
Sure. I had to turn okay. Yes. So evergreen content. So yes, that's basically content. Oops, sorry. Keep doing that. That's basically content that, can you see my thing right now still? Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. So that's basically content that can live, all year long or whatever it is. You can always refer back to it.
Sorry.
And I think that it's important to have stuff that is foundational and speaks to your business, right? So like if you have a brand storytelling piece, that's always going to be relevant for you. So if you always want to refer back to it, if you want to remind people, I do that a lot where I'll get new followers on my Instagram account or something along those lines. And I'll say like, hey, for those of you new here, here's what my bread and butter is. And I'll just kind of go through my services or whatever the situation is. Having evergreen content definitely makes sense. Obviously, like I wouldn't refer back to something I posted around the holidays if it's no longer relevant in the springtime. So yeah, just being relevant with the content, I think makes a ton of sense. And yes, evergreen content is for sure useful. It's kind of like your archives, having things that people can always go back to. It's also great for SEO if they're like, one-on-one level questions your people are asking about the industry or your services. You can always refer them back to that link or whatever that is.
Okay, and then the question that came up is, how do you evaluate a creative agency in terms of their fee and commitment?
That's an interesting question that I don't know if I'll be able to answer in regards to like content in particular. Everyone does something a little bit differently, obviously differentiator, but some people, so for example, like I do not do like videography and photography, but another agency might do both of those things as their bread and butter, and then partner with someone who is on the strategy side. So it really kind of depends. What I will say is like a tip to understanding, what makes sense for you is the longevity of that content you're getting from some of these people and how often you're using it and how often you'll refer back to it. I think that understanding the ins and outs of your own platform and understanding your brand voice is probably the first step in evaluating a potential agency or consultant. So knowing how you want to speak, how you want to portray your business, and then kind of asking those questions in the room with some of these agencies and consultancies is important. But yeah, everyone will differ in terms of fees. Some will charge specific to the post, some will charge for a retainer. It just depends how much content you can get out of it.
That's a good answer, because it is a very, there's a lot of options there when you're looking at an agency, and I think that's
Yeah.
there's another question about how do how exactly do you define content? Is it a blog? Is it a flyer, a discussion point, story, etc.? How would you define content?
Yeah, so that is the question, right? Like, as I kind of said in the upfront, content covers journalism, it covers movies, it covers news, it covers blog posts, it covers influencer content. Um, it's a generalization. That word is an umbrella for everything. And I think what's really important is not so much the word content, but really the creativity and like the piece of creative that comes out of the brand. So like if that's in the form of a blog post, excellent. If that's in the form of a photo, great. If it's art, awesome. Like it does not matter. Like the word is almost irrelevant. It's just what we're using to kind of like relate to one another. But really at the end of the day, it's whatever makes sense for your brand. A blog post for me may not make sense for the artist, like they're not going to maybe sit there and write out all of this stuff. They just want to create and be visual. And so their content is slightly different. So I don't think we should get too held up on, like the definition, and more so on what comes of your brand specifically.
So there's another question about what does it cost to hire an agency, and I think it's pretty direct. What kind of rate is standard and reasonable for a content marketing agency? I mean, I think you can better answer that than I can.
Yeah, I mean, again, like it's hard for me to say, some people will, like I said, like charge, it depends on people's contracts. Like if some people will have, a minimum, you have to work with me for 3 months and I have a monthly retainer. Some people will say like, yeah, I could do a one-off creative for you. And like, there is no contract that's like specific to a minimum of 3 months. It really depends. I'm happy to kind of connect on one-off with some, if anyone has like specific questions about rates, but generally speaking, I mean, like um understanding what like industry value is and what you're getting out of that person, how much content or the value of the content, and making sure it's the right type of content, like is really going to be the thing that helps you. And when someone gives you a proposal, like you should be, and you're speaking with this person, you should be able to tell. Honestly, sometimes it's a gut feeling of like, yes, this drives me, this doesn't. And so like, what do you put that worth and value on? At the same time, of course, money is money. So I think it just kind of depends on like, getting a feel for the field a little bit, get a proposal from a couple of people and understand what all they're offering and what their contracts are, and what the retainer versus a one-off project fee or a daily rate or hourly rate. Everyone works so differently.
Yeah, I think that's really, I think going back to something you said earlier, is defining what you want. And
Yeah.
you can have that conversation with a couple of agencies or with an individual. And when you talk to a couple of people or an individual, you'll start to get an idea of what the cost is. And I like what you said. I mean, money is money, and you need to know you have it in your budget.
Yeah.
You can have those conversations very early in the planning stage of either a new business or with an existing business as you're planning for a holiday marketing campaign or a summer marketing campaign.
Yeah. Yeah,
You know
exactly.
what you want, and you can ask the right questions.
Exactly. Yeah.
That was good advice. Any other questions from the group?
They've all been really, really great. So I thank you all for throwing
Uh,
them at me.
Great discussion, and I just want to remind everybody again that we will be sending out a link to this conversation today, and I think it's a really helpful tool to a new business or an existing business. And I also, just thank Danielle again for her presenting this event, and also thanking the Small Business Administration for supporting SCORE. I want to thank everybody for participating in our conversation today. I really appreciate it. Thank you very, very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.